Hi, I'm Bobby, and I want to talk for a few minutes about work because since I have had a very hard year during which I had to take a short break from working, I've had a lot of thoughts that are just kind of living rent free in my brain that I want to talk about. I think they're important. A healthy mind, a balanced, well rounded, and fulfilling life. These are things that have routinely, throughout history, been overlooked or even denied to regular working people. Free time has traditionally been for the rich. I'm so glad I wasn't alive in the 20s when basically everybody worked 100-hour weeks in crowded factories. I'm glad I was born where I was and not in a place where people are still forced to live their lives in those kinds of conditions, suffering unceasing exhaustion to make the things that make our lives over here as comfortable as they can be. The internet has enabled so many people to organize and work towards better conditions for everyone. Social media has created real ways for people to break through previous barriers to organization, and labor is experiencing a resurgence. I sincerely hope that this new age of robber barons will find its end in our lifetimes, though I worry that that may stay a hope. We are at the very least beginning to really take seriously that massive sections of humanity have been denied the chance to live a fair, fulfilling, and good life. Concepts such as degrowth are gaining traction through placing the lives of humans above the desire for material comforts and excess. And even the traditional office job, as we used to know it, has changed so much for so many that there's no need for a huge amount of workers to even go into an office building. However, we still do work extremely hard. The Protestant work ethic, that propagandized machine of guilt and shame that turns regular people into auto exploiters so that they can continue to serve the 1%, is still alive and well. Grinding away your days in service to a system that doesn't give the slightest care about your well being is still considered by many to be a virtue, and there is no worse insult than to be called lazy. This level of mass delusion makes it incredibly difficult to summon up the courage to withdraw from work for any amount of time, but it can be necessary when you're at your wits' end and your mental health is suffering to make some space to retreat from the never ending grind for capital. It's a luxury to be able to do it, certainly, and that's a horrible injustice. Because if we could take our heads out of the asses of tech bros and their AI slot farms, we might realize that we're in a golden age of art and expression made possible because people have enough time to create art that benefits through the internet everyone. People with healthy bodies and minds are capable of enriching all of us with art and story and sport. On the other hand, people who are miserable, exhausted, and sick can barely manage anything but consuming after all their energy and being has been used up by the machine, which I suppose is probably part of the point. I've had the incredible privilege of taking a step back from full time work for 3 months, working only part time to address my mental health and to build myself back up. I had a huge breakdown earlier this year, and I had to get my shit together before I could do anything else. And honestly, I found that rest difficult to do. I hate that I do it, but I attach my identity to my work, and taking time away rendered me deeply aware of just how far I had to go before my career was at that ephemeral, always shifting point where I might traditionally have thought I'd have made it. Nothing can make you feel more disempowered than feeling like there's a job to do and just not being able to do it. It took me a long time to become aware that laced throughout society are examples of good people who have been stretched beyond the point of being able to work for whatever reason. Mental health issues can be just as valid, painful, and debilitating as physical maladies. The person holding a sign that reads, "Anything helps," at a stop sign is in a position that I could very well have also been in had I not also had access to the resources, savings, and the wonderful partner that I do now. Our economic system was not designed to provide and care for human beings with needs. It was designed to exploit the most exploitable and to jettison the rest to the fringes. The unhoused, the disabled, the neurodivergent, all alike are labeled lazy and branded with a scarlet letter. The rest are taught to look with disdain on the supposed freeloaders and welfare queens, oblivious to how precarious so many of our situations actually are, how close we could be to falling into the same position. And yet, I did, in the end, take advantage of my position and take that break for a few months. And even though I have been able to heal so much, all of these thoughts about work have never left me. As I take on more jobs again and become busier, I find that the fears I have of being seen as lazy are still hanging over me. How much work is the right amount of work? How much is too little? How many discrete projects do I need to work on at any one time to be considered productive, to get ahead, to grow my business or impress a potential client, or even just keep up with others when it seems like everybody else has these insane capacities to work and achieve? I beat myself up and I fall into a spiral of self hate, and then I fall flat on my face. I rinse and I repeat all day long until I have either done enough work to feel satisfied or feel sufficiently self flagellated. Despite having made significant progress in healing and growing through a great deal of mental illness and addressing serious trauma that I've never been able to face before in my life, I still feel guilty for having been given the time and resources to have done that. Despite having found a way to live my life that kind of works for me, despite having a career that allows me flexibility by virtue of how I've managed and designed it, I feel as though I've cheated somehow. Like the rest I've taken is somehow obscene and ugly. And I suppose that some may say that it has been obscene and ugly. There's always that extremely loud and aggravating contingent of conservative assholes who tell you that you deserve whatever pain you feel if you haven't converted X amount of your waking time to the grind to justify your place on this crowded planet. I marvel sometimes that Silicon Valley hasn't instituted a purge already, but then the tech bros probably understand that the people who buy their broken apps and services have to be kept unhappy in order to be susceptible to their dystopian marketing tactics. And I mean, we're still worth more alive than dead, I guess, at least at the moment. I promise I'm not always this dark. My brain can be a really uncomfortable place. I'm feeling more hopeful actually than I have in a long time. I mean, mostly due to seeing just how many wonderful people there are in the world that are leading the charge to improve things for all of us, not just for rich assholes who run the joint at the moment. Returning to more regular work has given me more of a feeling of autonomy and freedom than I've had in a while. And I have a renewed passion for what I do for a living, and that's felt really great. But if I've learned anything at all this year, it's that if I don't change things in my own life, I'll just fall back into the same patterns of burnout and exhaustion that led me here in the first place. I believe that my conception of the ties between work and worth are just fundamentally wrong. I used to hear the word worthless thrown around a lot when I was younger in reference to those who don't work hard enough. And I've synthesized that adjective and learned to identify with it very easily. Like a drug, I use work and achievement as stand-ins for real self-love, for feelings of belonging and worth and value. And I don't think I'm the only person who does this. I think that lots of otherwise very reasonable, compassionate people tie theirs and others' value to their achievements. I think that it's an easy trap to fall into when that's the rhetoric we've been fed from preschool or kindergarten to wherever we are in life right now by schools and the news and bosses. I also think that it's an issue of buying wholesale into the propaganda of big business and the rich elite whose wealth would dry up if we were to change work to benefit those who do the working rather than just those who own the factories and offices and shopping malls and just take a cut off of our labor. Look, there's no evidence to suggest that humans would just stop working if they weren't always on the precipice of disaster if they didn't. People are industrious. We like to make things, to move the world forward, and work together for the well-being of ourselves and the people around us. The world would not stop spinning if workers owned their own companies collectively instead of the capitalists who own them now. Humans do not need to exploit one another to have a functioning society. I really believe that. Okay, look, I've been ranting, so I want to sum this up and offer some kind of takeaway. Despite what I believe to be a broken system that takes advantage of people's energies to benefit only a select few, I've been able to afford the luxurious freedom to take time to address my mental health this year. But all the while, I've felt guilty about it because that's how the system propagates itself. If you don't feel guilty about looking after yourself as opposed to always prioritizing your duty to your boss, then this whole thing kind of breaks down and the one percenters will eventually have to get a job like the rest of us or go back to more overt ways of compelling the masses to perform the labor that makes the machine run. Taking care of yourself and your family by making space for being human and resting is an act of rebellion and one that you're probably programmed to resist, just like I have been. But you aren't just a money-making machine. You're not a puppet or some kind of AI chatbot. You're a human being, and just by being born, you deserve to live a fulfilling life. We all do. And if you need a break for whatever reason, then you should be able to take care of yourself without the specter of artificial guilt hanging over you, telling you that you ought to feel guilty for it.